Welcome, welcome, welcome to Community Church Unitarian Universalist. So I am your minister, the Reverend Darcy Roque, and it is a joy to be with you virtually and in person today. So thank you so much. I'm going to invite our amazing Community Church UU Board President, Amy Earhart Lovelace, up here as well, because she'd like to tell you a little bit about our mission. And I would just like to say that it is through her work, her humor, her compassion, her kindness that helped us get through this year at Community Church Unitarian Universalist. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I am delighted to be here and to be with you and seeing you in person. Welcome. Who are we as Community Church Unitarian Universalist? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. You can look at your weekly email for announcements, and I believe that Darcy has a couple more.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. All right. Well, first, as you might have noticed, we are in person. And there's been an amazing team that has been leading this work. I want to lift up our board, in particular, Amy Earhart Lovelace, Kathy Larimer, who's been leading the team, Bill Fernandez, Jim O'Neill, so many other folks, Amelia Earhart Lovelace, who have been doing all of this incredible work to get us started. So I want to thank everybody. And you know what? If we've learned anything from this year, it's that we're just going to be good enough for the time. We're not going to try to do anything perfect. So, please help us figure out the best way for us to move into this space. Right now, we're going to be wearing masks, so we ask that you do that. We're spread out. It looks like there's going to be enough room. If we have some latecomers, I feel a little guilty, but they'll just come and join me up here. We don't mean to do that, but we have a few seats up here actually as well, too. So it looks like we have enough folks, seats for folks, and we're going to adjust as needed. So thank you so much. Now, we won't be doing coffee hour for the time being. However, conversations are wonderful, and it's really lovely that we have space outside our church. There's a park across the street, and right here too. So please, we have a lot of beautiful grounds outdoors, so please use those to full effect to have some great conversations. We are also looking for some more greeters. We have an amazing group of greeters, so if you are interested in being a greeter for a Sunday at CCUU, please email membership@ccuunola.org. Or honestly, talk to one of our greeters, and they will write down your name. Also, many of you might not have known this news. I know we announced it in our online services, but Community Church UU member Russell Thames died in February. I think we had mentioned that. His memorial, we were able to have a small COVID memorial service with less than 10 people, but we are going to have a larger service now that we're able to. It's going to be at Lake Lawn Metairie Funeral Home, which is 5100 Pontchartrain Boulevard, on Friday, June 11th at 4 p.m. There's a reception to follow on the lawn. Given the folks who know Russell, his friends have created a beautiful service where we're going to have a Unitarian Universalist minister, his best friend who's a Catholic priest, and his other best friend who's a Buddhist. So it's going to be beautiful and very reflective of who he was as a person. We're going to have a second line as well. So y'all are invited. We're going to put the info in the announcements for the next few weeks, but I just wanted to get that on your calendar as well. So with that, thank you for being here. We are delighted you are here. And let us light our chalice with the music from our chalice lighting.
Oh my goodness, to see everybody's faces again. Hey, everybody. already? Well, smiling eyes is what I call them. So I'm going to read to you today. It's called Some of Us by Julie Sheldon. Some of us must stay home and not go out the door. Some of us are working like we've never worked before. Some of us are falling out with siblings, dads, and mothers. Some of us are reaching out and looking after others. Some of us are keeping busy, doing lots of jobs. Some of us have given up. We're turning into slobs. Some of us are playing games and learning brand new hobbies. Some of us are still no good and watching out for bobbies. Some of us have lots of friends to text with and to phone, and some of us have no one and feel that they're alone. Some of us feel positive and think that we're in charge. Some of us feel anxious and fear the world at large. Some of us have footpaths to cycle, walk, and jog. Some of us have nowhere nice to even walk the dog. Some of us are welcoming new babies being born. Some of us have lost loved ones and cannot truly mourn. None of us will ever know what's really going on. None of us will think the same when all of this is done. All of us can choose to spend our days in fear and dread, but all of us can choose to plan for better days ahead. Thank you.
I promise this will make sense on this beautiful sunny day where we just listened to This Little Light of Mine. Our first reading is from Job. It's a lament, but I do promise that we are talking about wintering and summering and all the feelings in between. So here is our first reading. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. Job said, "Damn the day I was born and the night that forced me from the womb. On that day, let there be darkness. Let it never have been created. Let it sink back into the void. My worst fears have happened. My nightmares have come to life. Silence and peace have abandoned me, and anguish camps in my heart." A deep, deep lament. Well, here we are as a community Church Unitarian Universalist. And I will say that as we have moved into this year, the support of this community has been so essential in keeping us together, in keeping a service each week, in our pastoral cares, in the ways we connect. We give so much as this community, and hopefully we also feel that love return to us. And so in this time, we're going to recognize that we are a self-sustaining congregation. And yes, that does mean financially, but that also means the ministry that we all do together. So I want to thank each and every one of you for all that you've given to Community Church this year. Yes, financially, but also all you've given when you've made a phone call to a member you haven't heard from for a while. When you've offered to help the minister figure out tech when she was a little befuddled. When you stepped up to connect with folks and to just reach out. When you gave to food banks and helped others in need to show our Unitarian Universalists values in the larger world. I want to say thank you. So at this point, we're doing the financial offering, and we're going to do it a little bit differently. There is our offering basket. We're going to ask folks to come forward and put their offering in the basket. However, if you are not able to get up to give the offering, that is fine. Cynthia will be able to come and bring the basket to you as well. So it's your generosity in all these ways that help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. Also, for those of online, hello. As you know, now also we have another group of wonderful people that are joining us online, not just in New Orleans, but in different states across the United States and actually sometimes other countries. So we've opened up, we really have gone beyond our four walls. So we are going to continue doing that work as well. And so as well, you can give online at ccuunola.org/stewardship, or you can text 504-370-2659 and text GIVE. Of course, you can send a check or leave an offering at 6690 Fleur-de-Lis Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70124. We thank you. Thank you so very much. And now is our sacred time, which, for those of you who have joined us online, I feel has become even more sacred in this past year, as we've not been able to connect in person each Sunday. And I hope it remains just as sacred. I know it will. Our time of joys and sorrows. So we will be doing it a little bit differently. You may have seen when you came in a joys and sorrows box. I have the cards that you have done. But in this musical interlude, if anyone would like to add a joy and sorrow out in the foyer area, please do. And we will pick them up, and I will read them aloud from the pulpit, as well as having Cynthia light the candles. But now that we've moved into an online space as well, for those of us joining on YouTube and Facebook, they can put their joys and sorrows in the chat box still, and we will read them aloud. And finally, in your Thursday announcements, there is a link to add your joys and sorrows that we'll have ahead of the service. So hopefully, we will have been able to create enough of a space for everyone to share. So with that, now is our time to reflect on our joys and sorrows. Thank you so very much. First, a joy. Well, actually, Cynthia's going to come on back and light our candles. Again, I would like to lift up a joy for the amazing religious education director, Cynthia Ramirez. Who has gone above and beyond this year and has become really a worship partner in so many ways. Our collaborations have been incredible, so thank you, Cynthia. A joy from Laura Carmen. Our son and his fiance are coming to visit for a week. First time in 17 months. That is a joy indeed. It is a joy to be back in church. This wonderful place is my home away from home. Alan Malone writes, sad to bid farewell to Avis Moore, who is going to be moving. She lives part of the time in Maryland and New Orleans. A friend for almost 50 years. Ellen writes that she is leaving for Longview, Texas, May 18th, but that this is not goodbye. June 18th, got it, June 18th. Yeah, that would have been a difficult one. That would be difficult travel. June 18th, not goodbye. We will miss you, but we hope to see you when you are back in town, absolutely. And online. Jim and Vera write, that is a joy to be back in community church. That is a joy indeed. Joy at reunion of UU friends at dinners for 12 last week. And if folks are interested in doing those dinners, please do reach out to Marilyn Malone online as well. Laura Miller writes of a joys of being back and seeing everyone. Also, I've had a wonderful week, fabulous conversations with friends. A sorrow. Leaving in sorrow for Virginia. Last time to hear Reverend Darcy preach in person. Miss you more. Jada online writes that my friend Jennifer is getting married. Congratulations. Elise online wrote that she has started treatment a little over a week ago. The drugs are clearly doing something, which is good. The headaches are very, very real. I'm told they may go away in a week or two. Positive direction and energy would be hugely welcome. Elise, we are sending you love and light and healing. Carol writes that many of you know that my husband, Chuck Boster, has suffered with Alzheimer's disease for many years. During the pandemic year, his condition worsened to the point that he needed a dedicated memory care facility. Long story short, I moved him into the memory care at Vista Shores on May 1st. The long goodbye is tough. Sending you so much love, Carol. You and Chuck. Bill Fernandez writes that he was excited to see his nephew Jake graduate from Baton Rouge High School last Monday. He will be attending LSU in the fall. That is wonderful. I would like to lift up, there's been so much news in the coming weeks, and I realize I didn't lift this up last week. I want to lift up love and care for all of those in Israel and Palestine. Love and care and healing amidst being in the middle of conflict. May the ceasefire remain, and may also in the future conversation and healing happen. It is a long time coming, and we hope and pray for it. And I just want to lift up 2 more candles. One for all the joys that are still bubbling up, that we have the chance now to share in our worship services in person. Yeah, all those joys on this beautiful sunny day. And we're also going to talk about this today a little more in the sermon. I also want to lift up all the sorrows that we're still holding, all that we've been through this year. I mean, I even think about at this pulpit, March 15th was the day that we stopped going in person. And through that, we have had Many beautiful things happen and many sorrowful things, and many things that we're still going to be processing. So I want to light a candle for all that. All the sorrow you may be holding, please know that we love you and that we care for you and that we are here for you at Community Church. And with that, our final two readings for today is first from Wintering, the Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Katherine May, an excerpt. Since childhood, we are taught to ignore sadness, to stuff it down into our satchels and pretend it isn't there. As adults, we often have to learn to hear the clarity of its call. That is wintering. It is the active acceptance of sadness. It is the practice of ourselves to feel it as a need. It is the courage to stare down the worst parts of our experience and to commit to healing them as best we can. Wintering is a moment of intuition, our true needs felt keenly as a knife. This is from a letter to a young woman by Rainier Marie Rilke. This was actually a correspondence. Rilke was a writer and poet, and this was a correspondence for a young woman who had become widowed. And Rilke wrote her for 5 years back and forth as they had a conversation about what grief looks like. Suddenly, to be healed again and aware that the very ground of my being, my mind and spirit, was given time and space in which to go on growing. In the depths of winter, I finally learned that within me there laid an invincible summer. So, on this New Orleans day, when we are finally gathered together in person with this beautiful sun, I'm going to take us to the bleak landscape of an Antarctic research station. We just got here, you might ask, why are we going even in imagination somewhere else? Well, because while this research station may be halfway around the world, I'm hoping that it's going to help us better orient ourselves over the next few months as a people, emotionally and spiritually. Because yes, we are here celebrating. You can cheer with your masks on. Woohoo! Being back together in worship. And for many of us in the 12 and over crowd, we hopefully are closer to being fully vaccinated. We're starting to venture out into the sunshine and tropical rain of summer, but we're not there yet. We're in the third quarter of a Saints game, and we're leading. But who knows what might happen next? And so we are perhaps most anxious, worried, overwhelmed sometimes right now. We're in what researchers from the Antarctic Science Station, Camp McMurdo, call the third quarter phenomenon. As Time magazine notes of scientists' time at Camp McMurdo, one of the most desolate places in the world, there's first the surge of excitement when new arrivals join the camp. The feeling of isolation from the rest of the world when earth and sea disappear in the endless night from April to August. And the joy when the sun finally appears behind the mountains once again. However, no matter the weather or the length of deployment, about 3/4 of the way through their time at McMurdo, people kind of freak out. Or more scientifically, named by researchers studying people living in cold regions, the third quarter phenomenon, which is still theoretical, is categorized by mood shifts among people nearly finished with a long period of isolation. Sound familiar? Those affected often feel anxious, withdrawn, and increasingly vulnerable. Research suggests it often strikes people beginning 75% of the way through an isolating event. So there is much to celebrate in this third quarter of the pandemic. Hugs and close conversations between vaccinated folks, though not yet our youngest members, and a world slowly emerging, though not yet for Brazil and India and many other places that are still in the throes of the pandemic. But this idealist, realist, Unitarian Universalist also wants us to stay present too for this third quarter phenomenon. Or as author Katherine May notes in our reading today, the wintering we still may need to do, even as we reemerge in the summer and the sunshine, vaccinated, but also changed. Because there's something deeper going on than the simple physical return to public spaces. For some of us, while staying put, we have been going and going and going. So this year I've been nonstop, ensuring we had worship each week with a steep technology learning curve for me, giving birth and raising a newborn and homeschooling a 6-year-old. On a national level, we had an historic election, a moral reckoning with Black Lives Matter, an active hurricane season, and also a pandemic. So in different ways, your year may have felt just as hectic, if not more. Or perhaps you were bored, isolated, existentially terrified. We all have the shared experience of surviving a pandemic. We also had a variety of events in our lives, some tragic, some joyful, that we coped with in a variety of ways. This year I have my health, a job, a purpose, and the love and support of family and friends. Overall, I did okay, and it's getting better. And yet, for me, I feel like I'm only starting to winter. I'm only starting to process the sheer enormity of a traumatic birth, the exhaustion of overwork, the stun of insurrection, remember that in January? And 4 years of a former administration, fascistic former administration, that is actually still trying to get back power through bullying and voter suppression. But I should be happy. I should be relieved with every safe outdoor gathering, and sometimes I am with every vaccination milestone. But sometimes there's also a deep sadness, an urge to curl up. It reminds me of when I went to see Lars van Trier's Dancer in the Dark, which is a nihilistic musical with Bjork. Only after, this was back in college, only after 2 years of utter torture did I break into tears as the lights went up and cinema employees literally swept popcorn around my huddled mass. The third quarter phenomena, wintering, whatever you want to call it, is real. Because our emotions, thoughts, and feelings will pour out. They're going to pour out eventually, even if we've held it together, quote unquote, until now. And their timing may not always be right or rational. So let's acknowledge them, feel them, and recognize that we have all been through some stuff this year. And that's where I think the work of Katherine May and the book of Job, which are two wise texts separated by thousands of years, can possibly help guide us in the next few months as a church community, when things will be joyful and sometimes traumatic, freeing and sometimes confining, winter and summer confusing and confusing. So talk about confounding. The book of Job is one of the most ancient and confounding books of the Bible. And so for those of us who may need a Bible refresher course, this is an astoundingly brief and slightly absurd recap of Job. Job is introduced in the prologue as one who feared God and turned away from evil. Because Job is good under traditional wisdom literature understanding, God has rewarded him with wealth, children, the works. He is so good, in fact, that he catches the attention of the angel Satan, no relation to the much worse Satan, who bets God that if Job wasn't so favored for a God, Job would curse him. God takes the bet. And so the God-given, quite literally, catastrophes accumulate, loss of land and riches. Then the death of Job's family and a painful skin disease. In this sorrowful state, Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who I'm going to call Eli, Bill, and Zoe, Visit Job. What follows is a lament to end all laments from Job, who still does not disown God. Then comes a series of conversations between Job and his friends who try to puzzle out why any of this would happen to virtuous Job. Unsatisfied with his friends' answers, Job declares, "I insist on arguing my case with God." And you know what? God comes down in a triumphant whirlwind and responds. Job is seemingly satisfied, and God restores his life and family. Not, of course, the actual family that God killed, but a new one. That seems to be the end, all tied up. Now, I hope that you have not endured the trials of Job as of late. And I do believe it is very important to have some perspective on our suffering this year. However, as a wise chaplain mentor once put to me, as I rated the emotional pain of one patient over another, just because you judge someone's pain as less does not mean any person's pain is any less real. And so I also hope that you acknowledge your pain, your winter, your grief, even as things begin to open up. I hope you lament, whether it's to a therapist or God, family, or this church community. Cry out. Recognize that sometimes it's not all okay. And in so doing, you might actually leave open the possibility that one day it might be okay again. Because in lamenting, you may remember, too, that you have lamented before, that you have come through past difficulty. Because as May writes, when you start tuning into winter, you realize that you live through 1,000 winters in your lives, some big, some small. What winters in your life have you already come through? Death of a loved one, a dream deferred, depression, physical pain? Are you over your grief now that the event is done? I think probably not. For me, some days it may feel just as raw as when the grief first happened. In other days, it doesn't arise at all, because spring and summer do come after winter. Job's life was once again reconstituted with a new family, restored riches, and community. Though I wonder, in Job's remaining days, if sometimes the sharp pang arose, a missing, an unspeakable grief about the loss of his family. I bet it did. And yet we endure. Because emotionally recovering from this pandemic period is not going to be straightforward. As May notes, in order to get better at wintering, we must see our lives as cyclical seasons rather than a linear progression. But that's hard, because wintering and a return again and again to lament is counter to our dominant cultural narrative of self-improvement, with its ethos of linear progression toward states of ever-increasing flourishing. And it's counter, too, to the world's major spiritual traditions, with their ideas of salvation and enlightenment. Now, we Unitarian Universalists may not have salvation theology in the same way, but we know that we all lean pretty hard on spiritual progression throughout our lives. And the political arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That can be a hard habit and, honestly, expectation to break sometimes. And all is not bleak in a frozen tundra when we return to lament, because seasons of emotion mean that we will not be in a state of perpetual winter, that just like grief, joy surprises us every day, too, like laughing for the first time after the death of a friend, or feeling comfort the numbness dissipating from a hug from a loved one, appreciating sunshine after a pandemic Netflix binge, and surprise at everything in between, including who we might have become in this time. These days, honestly, I can maybe watch a Jean-Claude Van Damme action film. Perhaps one day I'll be able to return to that bleak cinema art house fare of my youth. But honestly, for now, all the emotionally resonant pieces I can handle are already inside of me. Job took the time he needed for lament. Not even God chiding him, nor his friends comforting him, not particularly well, nor fellow townspeople shunning him could move him towards re-entry into community. It took time, silence sometimes, lament sometimes, and everything in between. So what might we actually do for each other during this third quarter phenomenon? Job's friends Eli, Bill, and Zoe might help us consider what we might do, or honestly not do, in this pandemic third quarter. So to be fair to Job's friends, Eli, Bill, and Zoe are actually also narrative devices in wisdom literature. So they're ways that questions about theodicy, for example, why bad things happen to good people, can be talked through in the text. It's really, really cool. But that being said, if we just look at them as characters, boy, can Job's friends be jerks. Or at least, honestly, utterly and completely human. Because at least they showed up. Think of all of Job's other friends and neighbors. Where were they when Job was reduced to sackcloth and ashes? Before I bring judgment on Job's friends, I think of times when I have failed in the face of others' grief. Decades ago, a friend from high school's parents died in a plane crash. He was 17 years old. When I saw him at a party looking grief-stricken, I couldn't bring myself to cross the room to say how sorry I was, offer the smallest shred of condolence. I averted my eyes, justifying it by the friends that were already surrounding him. He didn't need me anyway. I regret that casual cowardice. I suppose I didn't want to imagine that same pain, so raw and real. Ever since that moment, I have worked to be brave amidst others' grief and pain and anger, crossing hospital thresholds, in hard conversations, in simply being present for whatever comes. And this, I believe, is where Job's friends got it right. They met together to go and console and comfort him. They sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw his suffering was very great. It was only after that long silence that Job finally spoke the visceral lament that we read part of today. From a pastoral point of view, Job's friends were on the right track, meeting Job where he was, in silence and presence. Because sometimes with trauma so deep, there are no words, and it's only time, whether 7 days or 7 years, that allows people themselves to articulate and eventually live with loss. The loss not only of a person or an event, but also who we were before our sorrow, before our grief. Now, I think we at Community Church UU, we show up as a people. When someone just had a baby or a family member has died, we arrive with meals, with calls, with an outpouring of love. Community Church does that better than anyone I know. As a community, we are good at this, and this is a great thing. But also, time doesn't heal all wounds on a set schedule. And in some things, like pandemic grief, we may not, any of us, simply have one event we can point to and say, that is where my sorrow happened. That's what I need fixed. A third quarter wintering at a time like now is when we should be hopeful, is not rational, but it's real. And sometimes our own discomfort comes to the fore when we try to comfort those who we feel aren't getting over their pain. Bill, Eli, and Zoe, they got uncomfortable. and scared after Job's lament. They saw a friend and a good human being hurting. They wanted to fix, find an explanation. And so the first thing they turned to, there must be something you did, Job. There must be something, because otherwise it could happen to us. Job rightly rejected this logic, as we all should, because this grief doesn't often have simple answers. And so what we can do is share our struggles and be there for each other in our struggles, not to fix, but to simply be present, which, as author Katherine May notes, may involve the breaking of a lifelong habit, one passed down carefully through generations, looking at other people's misfortunes and feeling certain that they brought it upon themselves in a way that you never would. As May notes, this isn't just an unkind attitude, it does us harm because it keeps us from learning that disasters do indeed happen and how we can all adapt when they do. It stops us from reaching out to those who are suffering. But also, watching winter and really listening to its messages for ourselves, we learn some basic truths, that effect is often disproportionate to cause, that tiny mistakes can lead to huge disasters, that life is often bloody unfair, but it carries on happening with or without our consent. So listen, as we consider our months ahead in this pandemic third quarter, the wintering as we might process grief, are we spacious enough to give ourselves some grace, some love, and some compassion, especially when we don't do everything right? And can we as a community actively extend that grace and love and compassion to other people? Listening, being patient, leading with love, and what I like to now call an affection for imperfection. In this way, might we live into the warmth of a beloved community, even within an Arctic season of emotion. Grief must be attended to throughout our lives. It has no project completion date. But just as grief can return in unexpected moments, so can joy. So can summer. And we must also recognize these moments of joy too, of coming into a space together on this Sunday. In the months ahead, let us recognize that there is a power in lament, in wintering, individually and collectively, because resources are stored in the winter in ways that can be used throughout our lives. For as Rilke notes, perhaps we may find that in the depths of winter, we finally learn that within us there lay an invincible summer. Amen. Go in peace. And today our benediction is only one thing required of us. So let us move into that for this week, this month, this pandemic year, as we move out, hopefully, into a third quarter or fourth quarter, and the game is over in a good way. There is finally only one thing required of us. That is to take life whole, the sunlight and shadows together, to live the life that is given us with courage and humor and truth. We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all our wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain, in its yearning, in its praise. Then peace shall enfold our days, and glory shall not fade from our lives. We love you. It is wonderful and beautiful to see your eyes, your smiling eyes, and we look forward to seeing them again next week. Go in peace, love, joy, lament, wherever you're feeling right now. Amen. Go in peace.